I hear you're working on an open source learning record store. Is that true? Is that rumor true?
Yeah, that's right. So we're working on an open source learning record store called Learning Locker, and that sort of journey began about a year ago, where we were working on a project to try and allow individuals to start taking ownership of their learning data. Especially in the corporate world, same in education, we've been busy capturing what it is people do and kind of keeping it to ourselves. But really, especially as we start to get into the Experience API and a sort of more granular level of detail and data, there's a lot of data that we're starting to own about people that really is theirs. And actually that was kind of our point there. What can we do to give some ownership back to the individual?
So, how do people respond? What do you think? Do they know what to do with that data? What's because data is exciting, and to some people it's not, right? I mean,
so we built out. We spent a few months sort of wireframing, building a product that we felt was representative of what we wanted, and we released it to a few limited people, and they tried it, and it works quite well. I've got my own like Learning Locker CV and things like that.
Right.
But yeah, it became obvious pretty quickly that 99% of people would not apply to do this.
Right.
It was quite a lot of work, and owning your learning data is fundamentally dull at the end of the day, especially when it comes in these sort of little triplet forms. Ben read the book. I mean, that would be a big example.
Right.
Ben read a page is more likely to be what the sort of data you're getting.
Right.
This isn't interesting at that level.
Yeah.
So you got to find a way to think about how we can aggregate that up and how we can not start at zero. Because if you start at a blank page and say, okay, from today I'm gonna start owning my learning record, you've got to do a lot of owning before you've got any record that's of real use.
I mean, that's the trouble with statistics. It's really about the sampling, right? How large the amount of data is.
Exactly. So this is when sort of back in October 2013, something like that, we decided to pivot. We decided to change, and we kind of made this decision that actually, what we should do first is we should tackle organizations. We should get organizations owning their data in a way that was more normalized, more standardized, adherent to standards, and from there we could then give ownership of that data to individuals. So we started to try this out a few times, whereby an organization would collect some data on behalf of its learners for a few months and then present them with a learning record of what they'd achieved. And at that point, individuals took to that much more readily. It was kind of like getting one of those coffee stamp cards that you get, but with like 3 or 4 of them already punched in. You're kind of like, geez, I'm halfway there now. This is worth keeping. And so actually, this is where we thought, okay, now we're maybe onto something.
Right. Are you helping him kind of parse that? Are you helping him kind of understand what that means?
Yeah. So the project at that point sort of took on a different life, and we decided that we were going to do this in a very open source and sort of community led way. That started out with the individual, because if we were going to allow an individual to own their learning record, then it kind of always felt like they had to be able to own the software that went with it. Otherwise, you're kind of like, it's just another service that somebody else owns and somebody else runs. So we'd always envisaged this as an open source thing.
Right.
And so when we made the switch to doing it for the organizations, we kept the same ethos. We wanted to still be open. So at that point, started putting together governance boards from people in the UK, US, Europe, to sit and help advisors and think about how we can fundamentally enable organizations and individuals to deal with learning data in a better way. So now we have our mission fundamentally is to enable organizations' needs, but individuals' rights when it comes to learning data.
So how are people responding to that? What do you find that they're you come back with this data? What are they doing with it? What are they doing to help their organization change or move?
So this is another issue behind the scene of collecting data is, the more we do it, the more we realize that you really have to start out with a purpose behind it. If you don't design with the data in mind, then you end up with a pretty shoddy end product. So, we live and learn, and these are some of the lessons that we're going through right now. There are some exciting looking ways that we're starting to feel like this data is going to become more useful. So you can look at learning design, for example, and suggest that an organization might look to refine its learning design based on some of this data.
Sure.
What are the sticking points? What are the things that people are failing at? We had one set of multiple choice questions, which is a pretty formal thing to still be dealing with, but we were dealing with it in this sort of new data-driven way, where one group of people from one set of people from a retail store failed a set of 4 multiple choice questions 58 times. Which is a pretty outstanding way to know that actually they are just guessing. I mean, this is almost a statistically infeasible amount of times to do this. Right. But actually, when we started digging into the data a little bit more, we started to understand that actually they're doing a lot of this on a Sunday in the stores and things like that. And now it's becoming obvious that actually this particular store was overstaffed on a Sunday, and so now all of a sudden we're able to feed back into the business and suggest, hey, look, you know what, with this activity that's going on here, it seems pretty obvious to us that nobody's walking in the store on a Sunday, and they're just doing whatever they're doing to pass the time. Right. And so you start to feed back stuff that starts to become a little bit more relevant to the organization. So learning design is certainly the one area there. That relating to performance is the next area, because we're kind of interested in not just getting data out of learning systems anymore. That's nice, but it's not as interesting as it could be to the business. So now we're interested in getting performance information out of CRM systems or anything that's sort of performance related in the business and correlating that with other activity.
It's been nice to see there's been a shift kind of lately where we're realizing the connection between performance and learning and development, and how those two need to kind of work together. And Experience API seems to be kind of one of the things that's helping us kind of bridge that gap, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it used to be that, you know, the business has some problem and they go to the learning and development department and say, oh, you know, we probably need a course for this or something, because that seems like the right way to solve this problem. And then the development department go, okay, we'll do this. So then they think, well, given these learning outcomes that we need to reach, let's design some curriculum. And then we measure back against the learning outcomes as to whether we actually did that. And very few people are ever able to make the link between, well, we achieved learning outcomes, but did we achieve the desired business performance? Right. The world moves. So they find that very difficult to track. They always have. I think this sort of lends itself much more to not really focusing on courses so much as resources, and thinking about what are the different tools that we are putting at people's fingertips to enable their performance, and then how can we relate that back in a very just-in-time sort of manner to what they're doing day to day, so that, you know, Bob goes and reads this and then goes and does that and whatever, and starting to get into that level of granularity, I think is quite exciting for really aligning L&D with what is core to making business more effective.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear the success stories and kind of the how performance support is really kind of entering into the conversation. It seems really important.
Yeah, the learning record stores kind of, for me, we kind of see it as being a fundamental piece of infrastructure now at this point. That, you know, it's probably not going to be a hugely sexy piece of software or anything like that, but you know what, it's going to be pretty necessary. And so I'm almost excited about making something that's not that sexy at the end of the day, because you know, I'm often very busy making gamified this and social that and things like that. And you're like, it just collects data really well, man. And you're kind of like, well,
there's nothing wrong with being a nerd. It's all right, man. I appreciate it.
Exactly. And I've been geeking out on the open source side of it as well. The open source side of it's been fascinating to me. Like, the amount of work you have to put in to give something away successfully is incredible. And, you know, we're starting to get our first contributors from outside of our own core programming team now. And this is really exciting. Last week we put out a call for language translators, and within a week we had the whole thing in Italian, Turkish, Dutch. And we kind of like, that's pretty cool.
That is really cool. I love the sense of community, and I was talking to Aaron about that, and it's like, it's great to see how many people are kind of behind this as a movement, I guess, if you will, and as a, you know, as the industry kind of shifts, and especially over to the performance support side. Well, I appreciate you sitting down and talking to me, and pleasure meeting you, and looking forward to hearing more about your success and what you're doing.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.